and welcome, fellow bookworms and film fans. Welcome to this week's episode of The Contented Narrative, where we will be looking at The Body, aka The Stand, by Stephen King, in this short collection of stories, different seasons. Now, The Body was originally written and published in 1982, and the film Stand By Me was released in 1986. Now, I'll be looking at four things. I'll be looking at how good is the film, how good is the book, how well does the plot take from the book, and overall, how well is the film in regards to the book. Now, the film, this King adaptation is absolutely amazing. It is a lovely coming-of-age story about four friends searching for a body of a young boy of the same age as themselves. The acting is amazing, the camaraderie is fantastic, the chemistry between the characters is brilliant, and the actors. The pace is perfect because it keeps you entertained in the story without going too slow or speeding too much or having too much action or adventure. It's just a nice story of four boys. Now, however, it does also show like the rituals and the games and the bonding that you kind of have with kids at that age, and it's just such a sweet little story, and even the ending is absolutely brilliant. Where you feel contented with what you've just watched and you feel happy that this is kind of how it ended. And I appreciate that in a film. I appreciate after you finish watching it, you go, oh, that was nice. I would recommend Stand By Me to anyone. It is a fantastic film and it gets a 7 out of 10. Now, the book, I always love a good Stephen King novel, do not get me wrong. Apart from Tommyknockers. Not like Tommyknockers. It took me 5 months to read and I really did not like it. But this short story in a Different Seasons collection is a masterpiece. The whole story comes around because some boys want to find and report the dead body of somebody that's the same age as them. So then they decide to go out and they decide to walk along the train tracks to find this body. It's almost like a obsession at one point. Now, you know, but it isn't just what the story is about as well. So even though it's about four boys on a journey to something, two of them, Gordy and Chris, it's about more than that. It's about them realizing that they're better than this small little town that they're in, and that they can do better, and that they can achieve more. And it's about them realizing that the other two people that they're traveling with, you know, Teddy and Vern, are fantastic boys, but they're not going to go anywhere. And if they want to go any further in their lives, they have to admit that this isn't going to work anymore. And it's a sad one as well, but it's so heartfelt and so lovely that I would recommend reading this little short story of Stephen King's. I mean, I don't know if you can see up in there, in that corner there, on that shelf, is all our Stephen King novels. We don't have all of them, don't get me wrong. There are loads that we don't have, but they are fantastic, and I enjoy pretty much every single one. But this little short story, I had it done in a day. It was so beautiful. So I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. Now, the plot. The plot is almost identical. I'm going to tell you that now. It kept it almost exactly the same. So it starts with Gordy recounting the story from his childhood where they go searching for a body. Now, the book starts in a very similar way with the recount, and then Chris, Gordy, Teddy and Chris, Gordy and Teddy in the treehouse playing cards, and then Vern bursting in and telling them about a dead body. So then they want to go hunt for it. Now, we do find out about Gordy's dead older brother and the fact that he's then ignored by his parents almost because of the fact that he's not his older brother. We also find out about the abuse that Chris gets from his dad when his dad starts drinking. We find out about Teddy's near blindness, which is natural, but also his deafness, which is inflicted by his dad, who was a war vet, who basically put Teddy's ears to a stove and burnt them so badly he needs hearing aids. And then we find out about Vern, who is always beaten and abused by his older brother as well. So it's kind of, you see these characters as well for what they are. They're kids trying to get along in a world that doesn't really want them. So then Vern heard about the body of Ray Bauer as he was digging under the porch for his jar of coins. But he overheard it from his brother. So obviously he doesn't want his brother to find out because, his brother will beat him within an inch of his life. But he hears about the body from his brother. So then they all make a plan to go and find the body to get their picture in the paper. So in the book, we get an extract from one of Gordy's works when he's an adult called Stud City, which doesn't really happen in the film. And I'm kind of glad, because I feel like if you'd have put that extract of Stud City in the film, it would have taken away from what it was, which was a coming of age story of 4 boys. Now in both, Chris has a gun that he stole from his dad, and Gordy accidentally ends up shooting it and absolutely crapping it, which I don't blame you. I mean, you know, if you think that a gun is empty and then you shoot it and, you know, a bullet comes out, you would be worried as well. So then the 4 boys head out down the tracks. Now, first of all, they come to a dump to refill their water. So it's like a, you know, like a scrapyard, as it were, where we hear about, you know, Milo and his dog, Chopper. Now, a little link between the books here is we also find out that later on Milo has the dog Cujo. Now, anyone who's a massive fan of Stephen King obviously knows who Cujo is. And I love that in all these books, Stephen King is kind of building up his own little world, which I find really, I love it. Anyway, so we hear about Milo and his dreaded dog Chopper. So then they sort of realise that they need to get food, because none of them have thought to brought food for this long journey that they do. So they flip a coin and Gordy ends up having to go off and get provisions. When he returns, he almost gets caught by Milo and Chopper. Got it. There we go. He almost gets caught by Milo and Chopper. There's a big shouting match. You know, Milo's going, "Oh, you know, you boys, you don't have any respect. I'm going to call all your dads." And they kind of laugh him off, as it were. So then they go back onto the train tracks and they start to walk down. Now you get a very tense scene where they're crossing these train tracks over this massive river, and nobody knows when the last train has been. Nobody knows when the next train is due. So they start to cross, but while they're crossing, a train starts to come. Now there's no way for them to get down. They have to literally run to the end. So you get this tense scene where you just sat there. I mean, when I was reading it, when I was watching it, I'm like, oh my God, do they make it? Obviously they do. You know, you don't want to show 2 kids being squished by a train. I mean, it is a Stephen King novel, but still. So then they end up getting all the way to the end, which is, so far it's pretty much exactly the same in both narratives. Now we get Gordy telling the other boys a story later on about, you know, a story that he's made up about a pie eating contest. Where the guy gets bullied, so he enters this pie eating contest, and because he ate all the pies, he throws up on everybody, just to basically give them the retribution, as it were, that they deserve. Now we get a sweet moment in the book and the film between Chris and Gordy, where Chris basically tells Gordy that he is too good for the gang, and that when they start school the next year, you know, Gordy's going to start doing all like these college prep classes and everything, and they're just going to do like shop classes, and don't get dragged down, don't drown by trying to stay friends with us. And at that point, you know, Gordy at that point as well with Chris is like, no, but you can do better as well, which is so cute. Now the boys make camp for the night. They cook hamburger meat over a fire and smoke a cigarette each, which, you know, they seem to really enjoy. You know, boys, go figure. They also get woken up by in the night by noises that they don't recognise, because obviously they're in the middle of the woods and they're not used to it. So they end up taking watches to figure out, you know, to make sure that nobody comes into the camp. Because at one point they think as well that they're going to be attacked by, you know, the ghost of Ray Bauer as he comes to get them, as it were. Now we get a scene with the Leeches. Now it's slightly different in the narratives. So in the film, they're taking a shortcut, end up in a little boggy bit of water. They drop down in because it's a little bit deeper than they think. And then as they're coming out the other side, they see a leech, and then they start panicking, and then, you know, there's leeches everywhere, and then there's a big fat leech stuck on Gordy's manhood, as it were, and he takes that out and pretty much faints, which you would, you know, even if you're like an 11-year-old boy or whatever, or a grown adult, if you have a leech in your manhood, you're gonna faint. Now in the book, they see a clear pond that has sort of ended up being clear because a load of beavers have sort of like, you know, stopped the muddy water going in, as it were. So again, they all jump in, and then Gordy kind of sees something but thinks it's maybe a bit of leaf or mud or something on someone else. And then one of them gets up, stands up and sees the leeches, and then again everybody panics, pulls them all off, has a bit of a cry. Gordy again, manhood, faints, kind of comes round and is just kind of, constantly crying. And then they sort of go, okay, no, that's fine. We're all right. We're alive. But again, even if you're a 12-year-old boy or a grown adult, you don't want to be covered in leeches. It's not something you want. They're sucking your blood, basically. Now, in the book, we're being told the story from adult Gordy, so it keeps popping forward in his life as well. So it'll start going, and when I went away to college, I did this, and when I went, and this is my first book and everything like that, and this is what's happening in my life at the moment. In the film, we get that bit at the beginning and we get that bit at the end, but we don't really get it throughout the film, which I appreciate, because I like the fact that it's just a story. It starts with him, it ends with him, but in the middle, it's just kind of telling the narrative. Now, we do find out, which is a bit of a downer, that Gordy is the only one that's still alive in the present day. And we find out later why that is. And it's a bit dark, considering it was quite a nice story. But in the film, unfortunately, it's only Chris that isn't alive in the present day. All the rest of them are alive and well. Now, in the film, we've seen sort of like these bigger lads. We've seen them a couple of times in the film. And they are dangerous lads, basically. They do what they want and everything like that. In the book, we kind of hear of them, but we don't really see them until we hear that because Vern's older brother, has then told his friend, who told his friend, who then told this guy, and they're now on their way to find this body. And a part of you is going, okay, so they're driving, they're going to get there a lot quicker. But you want these boys, these four boys, these four friends, to find the body first, because you think, they've done so much, they've come so far, they've walked for days. Now, so the boys then find the body of Ray. Now, in the book, when they find the body of Ray Bauer, the heavens have opened, there's a huge thunderstorm going on. It's proper absolutely chucking it down. You get a description of what the body looks like. You get Gordy at one point being a bit shocked, as it were, because he's looking and the body doesn't have kegs, which I'm assuming means trousers, and he looks back and he can see them, and it kind of shocks him that this body has been thrown all this way without any trousers. And it's sort of like this realization, this dawning moment that this boy isn't going to live anymore. This boy has got nothing else in his life. He is gone. He is just a shell. And it's so powerful in both the book and the film. Now, the only difference in this scene is that, as I said, in the film, in the book, it's a thunderstorm. In the film, we've had the thunderstorm. This is kind of just nice sunny weather, as it were. So now we see the bigger and more dangerous lads turn up and try to claim the body of Ray. Now, obviously, the boys have been like, no, that's not fair, and they fight for it, and they fight tooth and nail to get it back. So Gordy kind of is just like, I'm not going to finish that. We've all got imaginations. Chris pulls out the gun that he's been hiding and kind of, waves it around. Vern and Teddy had run off at this point. So then the boys are like, the bigger lads are like, okay, we'll back off, it's fine. And then they back off, and you know that these kids are going to get it handed to them later, because they're not going to let it go. But it's fine, because at that point they've got a gun pointed at them, so the big lads leave. And then Teddy and Vern come back. Chris, Gordy, Teddy and Vern decide that at this point they're not going to be the ones to discover the body. They're going to phone in an anonymous tip, or someone's going to phone in an anonymous tip, but they should leave the body where it is. It seems only fair, it seems only fitting. So they cover the body back up and they leave it, which is a really sweet moment. And then they kind of make their way back, walking through the train tracks again. Nice long walk there. So they head back to town, and then when they get there, they head their separate ways home. Now, the film kind of ends here. And it explains what happened to the other boys, and the fact that Chris was being a peacekeeper and he ended up getting stabbed because he was trying to keep the peace between two people, which is extremely heartbreaking. In the book, it's a little bit more heartbreaking because, first of all, each one of them gets 10 times been beaten out of them, because we knew there'd be repercussions for waving a gun at an older guy. And they get beaten within an inch of their lives. Every single one of them does, by different people that were in the group. So you kind of get that. But then you find out that Chris pulled himself up by the bootstraps with all the ridicule he was getting from the teachers and from his friends, apart from Gordy, and from his parents. And he was pushing himself, and he ended up going, you know, to study to be a lawyer, and then he ends up being stabbed again because he's keeping the peace, which I think is horrific, because he pulled himself out of the swamp as it was. He was doing better. And you get that Gordy and Chris become friends and stay friends for so long because they're reliant on each other to push themselves to be the better person, whereas Vern and Teddy kind of drift off to one side. Now you find out that Vern dies, I can't remember which way around it is now. I think Vern dies by crashing a car with people in it. So he takes him out and several other people. And Teddy dies because he falls asleep on a sofa with a cigarette and sets fire to the building, essentially. So it's kind of, they died how they lived, as it were. And it's hard, because you realise that, you know, those boys, they probably didn't stand a chance. And then when you see Chris going for it and being better and then still not succeeding and still getting killed in the prime of his life, it makes you wonder, really, it does. But so that's how the book ends. It ends with Gordy recounting how his life has gone and how everything has happened with the boys. And it's such a beautiful story. The film narrative was so close, was pretty much spot on, and true to the story of the book. It included all the little conversations between the friends, like the little stories, the little heartfelts, that you can do better, don't drown, you know, kind of stories. The hopelessness of the main boys as they come to terms with who they are and what's expected of them. But then the fact that they're able to pull themselves up by their bootstraps, well, two of them at least, and be better than who they're expected to be. And it was a very faithful adaptation, apart from a few small, tiny little changes, but like not showing the beatings that the kids got later. But I can understand why, because the film, you know, probably would be a bit darker if at the end you saw all four of them getting beaten within an inch of their lives. And then only killing one of them off at the end. But I think it gets an 8 out of 10 for me for the plot adaptation. Now, overall, I think the characters were beautifully shown. The story was faithfully adapted. Couldn't say that word then. The pace was the same. The camaraderie was the same. You know, the little nuances were the same. The setting as well. And honestly, for a King adaptation, it was a lot closer to the book narrative than I think I've seen in a while. A few little touches here and there. I'm missing out the extracts from Gordy's older work. I understand it just didn't fit with the story, so I'm glad that they didn't do it. But overall, it was spot on adaptation, and it gets a 9 out of 10 for me. Now, this is my own opinion. Of course, I'm happy to hear if you agree or disagree. Please do leave it below in the comments. If there are any book to film adaptations that you want me to have a look at, leave it below in the comments or send me a message. I will be happy to add it to the list. Next week, join me for the contented narrative around Nothing Lasts Forever, which we know as Die Hard. So until then, remember to always keep it contento.